primarily address
Sorry.
distracted. In order to address a few disability variances that have been submitted to us. As the chair is unable to attend, we have to elect a chair pro tempore in her stead. We do have a quorum tonight with 4 of the 6 members, so we are an official meeting. Neither Adrian nor I can be the chair pro tempore in Bonnie's place because we're both city employees. So I would like to call a vote to select one of the 3 remaining members to be the chair pro tempore. The role is really just to facilitate the meeting and bring up the individual items for discussion and then for vote. And I can help you do that. I just shouldn't be the one actually doing it. And the process is pretty straightforward. It is you call up the next item on the list. You provide a brief description. We have a discussion for as long as we want to discuss the item, and then we call the item to vote. And usually there needs to be somebody calling for a motion to either approve or deny, and then there's somebody seconds it, and then there's a vote. So I can help you with the procedural stuff. It's not that hard, and it's pretty flexible.
I'm happy to do it if nobody else wants it on. Katie, no. Liam?
I will nominate Holly.
I was going to nominate you. Okay.
I second Holly's nomination. I will, since this is actually a vote, with the second, I bring the nomination of Holly as chair pro tempore for today's meeting up for vote. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Okay, vote is unanimous. Holly, you are the chair for the remainder of the meeting.
Excellent. I am looking for the agenda. Does anyone who has the ability to share, are they able to put up the agenda? There's so many.
Adrian, do you have that easily available?
I am able,
There
if it's helpful from a logistical standpoint, to share not only the agenda, but the documentation for the 3 requests that we'll be looking at this evening.
I think that would be really helpful.
That.
Okay. Let me begin.
Thank you, by the way, for having live transcript available each time.
You're welcome.
Very necessary for me.
All right. First, let's do the agenda. Can we all see that?
Yes.
Okay. Brian, you're taking minutes.
I am taking minutes.
Thank you. First on the agenda tonight is we're going to discuss a few variance requests. Does anyone need those documents? Should we bring them up? There are 3 of them. First of all, has anyone not had a chance to look, or does anyone have any initial questions or concerns, or should we go one by one? You have 3
This
questions.
is Leon. I have had a chance to look over them and have opinions on all of them.
Excellent. Katie, do you have any, Adrian, would you mind showing that file?
Sure.
The first one, the third one.
The first one is the biggest file because it came from a larger, it's a it's a larger project covering 3 different municipalities. Somerville is Somerville is the smallest one out of the 3. So I shared only the Somerville components because it would have been a lot, but
That one was quite concerning to me.
yes. And as I'm pulling it up, because I did speak with the project manager, and I did want to share that this project is slated to start in May of 2022. And these are things that they have dictated are concerns on McGrath Highway. So they're sort of repairing them until the bigger overhaul of McGrath Highway, which is coming in a couple years, happens. So that is what he told me. So that's the context I can provide.
And he would be the Massachusetts Department of Transportation.
His name is actually, let me pull this up.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, or is he the attorney? Or is that a sponsor? I'm asking simply because I think it would be good to have it listed in our minutes
Okay, sure.
that you spoke with this person.
The person I spoke with.
While you're looking, Brian, I know that there are two sides to the coin, but one side is that you don't have to prove that it is A or B. It has to be A and B. You know what I'm talking about?
No, what are you referring to in particular?
On the first question on the form. Excuse me, number 2, you have to prove that it says either technically infeasible or excessive and unreasonable. From my understanding, from the training I took months ago, it had to be both. I can look back at my notes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to believe that this is an AAB form.
Yeah. But do you know what I'm talking about? There is one where it's only, it has to be both. I'm not familiar enough with the variance process to question the AAB form. I would, however, it wouldn't make sense for it to be an and. Well, let's just table that for now. I'll make a note to myself, and if I find my notes, I'll let you know. I'll let the group know either way.
Yeah, because if something is technologically infeasible, there can be no cost attributed to it because it's not technically possible. And there's a good example of that in the MassDOT application.
Okay. So how should we go forward?
Well, Holly, I did want to answer your question about who I spoke to, just so it's clear for the minutes and the recording and the transcript. So I spoke with the project manager for Greenman Peterson Inc., who is the engineer and construction services, who will be essentially facilitating and completing this project. His name is Mark Elder, and so he is the project manager for them. The project manager for this project from the Massachusetts Department of Transportation is the gentleman listed on this application, Eric Nova.
Liam, I know that you had some comments. Let me just see. Kate, did you have any as well? No? Liam, you want to jump in and give us your feedback?
Sure. So my reaction to this was that it is dependent on the assumption that they're not updating the non-compliant sidewalks that they're saying that they're asking for the variance to tie into. And what I couldn't find in the request was any explanation of why those areas are not being updated, which I think is a necessary part to explaining why they need the variance, because if they were updating the entire area, then they wouldn't need a variance. So I think that if they can demonstrate a reason why this area that they're tying into is not being updated, then the variance request makes sense. But I wouldn't want to approve it without that explanation, because
I
it's entirely possible that there's a reasonable explanation for that. But I don't think that we should just approve it without actually asking for that, and without requiring that they justify why they're not updating this area that they're tying into.
This is Holly. Forgive me, do we actually have a vote or do we provide input to the AAB? That's
So Adrian, I don't know if you know more than I on that, but my understanding is that we are providing feedback to the AAB on whether A, we agree with the variance, or B, if we disagree with the variance, why we disagree with it.
Brian, that is correct. And
okay.
at that point, and I've had this email discussion with Bonnie, somebody from the commission, and Bonnie is willing to do it with appropriate notes, will need to create a memo for each of these of recommendations, really just bullet points of the things that were discussed. So it would be as simple as saying, because it sounds like, I feel like I already know the direction we're going in with this one. If we if you all do not see, you don't want this variance request, then you would have to say not recommended, and then you would have to list, such as Leanne just said, some concrete reasons about what your hesitations are and what needs to happen. And then Bonnie would send that to these contacts on behalf of the commission, and it would go into their record of recommendations, and then they would review it and may change their decision, and if I'm being completely honest, may not. So we are just simply providing recommendations. Bonnie did let me know the Architectural Access Board is having their January meeting on the 10th, in which they hear feedback about all the projects they're considering. And she did mention that one of the requests is on that agenda. I'm not sure if it's this one or another one we're discussing. And I know she had plans, if she could, to attend that and voice.
And
her
that's a
feedback.
public
Yes,
hearing.
it is. It is
May I
what they
clarify?
consider their public hearing. So like these meetings, anybody can go and provide testimony or feedback to any project that's on the agenda for the month.
You might have to sign up just so they sort of have a head count. I'm not
Yeah,
sure
I
they
think-
do, but just so I agree with everything you said, Leanne. I just wanted to verify that in truth we don't really get a vote, but I think that we have a very strong voice
Yes,
that they do need to hear.
yes.
Anyone, I'm looking at these images. And I don't understand from the visuals why there is a problem with putting in ramps. I'm on page 14, maybe. See,
Let
Forgive me
me
for-
get there. I'm gonna get there.
Yeah. Adrian, can I ask you a clarifying question?
Sure.
Is this variant just for the Poplar Street intersection?
There are 3 for Somerville on this particular one.
they are, the 3 listed are all ramps at Poplar.
Yeah.
Okay,
So those
So
are
it
the
is-
only, Warburn and Medford have much more involved in this particular project. But the 3 they featured for Somerville, as Holly just said, are at Poplar Street.
Right. And if you go to the next page, and Holly, it's just the 4 panels that they're showing in red, right? Correct?
Let
As
me,
far as I
um,
was able
further
to interpret it, the specific variance requests for the ones in Somerville, I believe were all tying in the new sidewalk to the existing non-compliant sidewalk.
Yeah.
And so requiring that the end panels of the project area transferred from a compliant slope to a non-compliant slope to match what's already there that they're not updating.
Yeah, okay,
You
that's what I
touch it,
thought too,
you
Leanne,
have
so
to
I'm
fix
glad to
the
hear.
whole thing. If you
Yeah.
touch a sidewalk, you have to, the whole sidewalk then has to be in compliant.
There,
Yeah, so that's my
except Holly,
question
there is a point where you have to meet, you can't, like, from that perspective, you would have to update all the sidewalks in all the city for just repairing of one intersection. At some point, you hit an existing condition that's non-compliant.
I believe it was 2015, that was the deadline for every city and town to have implemented their plans and have completed all of the compliance work that ADA and that this all was required in 2015. I know that's not, was never a possibility because it attached no funding. So it put us, many people, many cities and towns in the rears, but it's 2022. So I feel that at least this section of where they're working, it should all be compliant, in my opinion.
So let's go step by step. The section where it meets, the 2 panels where it meets Poplar Street. They're the two middle panels in red. Those 2 panels meet Poplar Street, which is outside of the McGrath Highway layout. So it's outside of the jurisdiction of the Department of Transportation. So they don't have any authority or ability to reconstruct the sidewalks on the city layout.
But the city does. Isn't there some type of cooperation or coordination?
So there is, but they can't force the city to reconstruct the sidewalk on their schedule. I will point out that Poplar Street sidewalks are on our schedule to be reconstructed as part of the Poplar Street pump station.
Do you know what that time frame is?
I think that is 4 years out.
So I think what I want from this is I suspect that the answer that they eventually come back with for why they can't bring it all into compliance right now is one that I will begrudgingly support as reasonable. But I don't want to just support approving the variance without them having even stated that. So my recommendation would be to support denying the variance as is and saying that it should be, yeah, resubmitted with this explanation. And if it is something like we can't, for whatever reason they have for not including the neighboring sidewalk in the project, in this particular project, I want there to be a plan for what is going to, yeah, when that is happening and what is going to happen with these non-compliant transition areas when it does happen, especially if it's they don't control the neighboring sidewalk because that's in the city, making sure there's a plan for what happens when the city updates it and now there's these non-compliant sidewalks that aren't part of the city's jurisdiction, and making sure that there's a plan for getting that all tied in and not having this strange non-compliant bit because nobody could affect both sides. So, but yeah, in general, I think the memo that I would want to send would be, we don't support the variance as is and think it should be reconsidered after they provide justification for why the neighboring sidewalk is not being brought into compliance.
Why does it, okay, I have to look back at the earlier part. There's not just the crosswalk issue, there's also the slope. And the slope, in my mind, seems pretty big. Was it 5%?
Is this for
of
the
it?
Somerville ones or the other city ones?
I thought it was Somerville, because it says Poplar.
Yeah, so the slopes, so Holly, what you might be seeing is that the slopes of the existing sidewalk are out of compliance. So they have to do a warped slab to match the new compliant sidewalk with the existing non-compliant sidewalk. Because if you didn't do that, you would end up with a tripped step.
There's no other way to.
There's no physical way that I've ever heard of that allows you to transition from one slope to another without actually constructing at both slopes.
Because you have the existing sidewalk that is not planned to be updated, that's at a non-compliant slope, which means that if it's going to transition seamlessly, the very edge of the last tile in the project scope has to end with that same non-compliant slope.
Right.
So the green is the state, and when it starts to red, that's the city? Is that the line, sort of?
Yeah, that's approximately the line. Actually, I think part of their construction is in the city, and to tie in, and that's pretty standard. And whenever you're constructing a new sidewalk adjacent to a non-compliant sidewalk, you always cut out what's called the transition slab, which is in here colored red. You remove that transition slab, even though it's new, and you reconstruct that up to the compliant sidewalk.
So how do you go, I mean, what would it look like? Just a pit?
Well, and I don't know if you can see what I'm trying to do.
I
Keep
see
it.
your hand, yeah.
So you have a situation where one is tilted in one direction and one is tilted the other direction. I'm exaggerating
That's fine.
so that you
yeah.
can see it. And then in between those two, there has to be a panel that kind of rotates a little bit to match those two slopes together. And that panel that rotates like that, you end up, when you build next to it, you end up removing that panel and replacing it with a flat panel that connects the two. So in about 4 years, when the city is reconstructing the Poplar Street pump station and reconstructs Poplar Street, the city will come through and reconstruct the sidewalk that's in white here, And then they will also reconstruct the red panel between the white and the green so that it is all green.
Okay. Do you think we
And
could?
is that
Go ahead, Lauren.
is that standard practice, or is that required by code that the transition panel is replaced?
I've never seen it written in code anywhere, but it is standard practice. Absolutely.
Okay, I'm just trying to think if that's something that we should specifically call out as wanting them to specify, or if it's
Yeah, I
can
mean,
be
that's
assumed.
that really is industry standard to construct. If you're constructing up to a relatively new sidewalk, or even a sidewalk that you know to be compliant, you construct all the way up to the point that it is compliant.
Okay.
So we have 90 minutes, correct?
Yeah. I mean, the question that I have on this
Yes.
is why did they determine, I understand the Poplar Street limit of work. What I don't understand is why they chose the limit of work on McGrath Highway.
Mhm.
And specifically, especially on the upper left-hand corner, why did they not include the bus stop that's right there?
Are you referring to the
Oh,
picture that we're looking at?
Yeah, the one on the screen right now. I'm sorry, upper left corner.
Okay, I did not realize that there was a bus stop there, and I think that that changes my opinion slightly, and that I would not just want them to justify why they didn't.
Isn't that Art Farm too?
It is the art, yeah, that is the art farm corner.
So, I mean,
Yeah, so in that case, I think my recommendation goes slightly more towards not just asking for them to have a reason for why they stopped it, but specifically requesting that they increase the project area to include the bus stop, because that feels particularly important to have unless they have a much stronger justification for why they are not doing that.
yeah, I think that knowing that Art Farm is right there with a bus stop, it's very important that it's that it meets or exceeds the minimum. And honestly, those are very narrow walkways, if you could even consider them a walkway. But there has been some work underneath the overpass, like the getting ready to be changing things. I don't know if this picture reflects that or not, but I think that there's, even though Poplar Street is only named in this, as far as being Somerville, there's no reason they can't widen these.
So they are, hold on a second. So they are widening the sidewalk on the upper left-hand corner onto city property to be able to construct a compliant accessible curb ramp. And they did come to the city for a license to do that. And let's see, and there's no existing accessible curb ramp or crosswalk at that section altogether. So it appears to me that they're trying to add in a crossing that previously did not exist.
But it doesn't go this way. It just goes between Poplar from one side to the other.
Exactly, it crosses Poplar. And I would think at minimum, they should reconstruct the sidewalk to the upper left to the point that it is either existing compliant sidewalk or to and including the bus stop.
I agree.
I agree as well.
Katie's nodding. She agrees.
Sorry, I don't have much to say. I don't really understand. I'm really just listening to you guys.
That's okay. Ask questions if you would like
I
to.
don't really even understand. I don't understand why this even, if they're rebuilding it, I don't understand why they.
Honestly, Katie, I'm a little confused too, because sometimes
Okay, I'm not crazy. Well, that's good.
sometimes these transition slabs do not require a variance, but
Right,
it may be that it's a mass dot issue.
yeah. And as I said, when I spoke with the project manager for the firm, his, I guess, attitude was it was sort of a fix until they got to the bigger projects, not only on Popular Street, but the bigger McGrath project as a whole, which is eventually coming. So,
Edward has a question. Your
Yes.
hand's raised.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
I just wanted to offer some public testimony on this. I'm a member of the Somerville Alliance for Safe Streets, and we were also watching this issue. And basically, I just want to express support for the committee's opinion so far. We wanted to make sure that was expressed that we really think it's appropriate to ask MassDOT to expand the project scope so that we don't need these variances. And along with that, to consider just not wasting the opportunity if we're going to be doing construction at this corner, to consider squaring it off into a proper T-shaped intersection without these huge sweeping turn radii, which are quite dangerous to pedestrians. It's not great to drop a new accessible sidewalk onto one of these turns that are quite known to be quite dangerous configurations. So if they're going to be moving curb lines around, it would be a really great opportunity to fix that problem as well.
That's a great point, Edward. Are you also providing testimony or submitting anything in writing?
Oh, I'd be happy to do that.
I think we'll absolutely include your comments here.
Sure.
And thank you.
Sure,
for
I could.
speaking up.
We can produce a letter for the committee.
I meant on your own behalf, I think.
Yeah,
before-
absolutely. On my behalf. Yeah. Sure.
Joan, you have a question?
Yes, I also wanted to, I'm with Edward, also trying to provide support for this. I do also want to add some color to that area. The bottom right block is not meeting existing conditions because it's the off ramp from McGrath, so there's no way that slope is going to be anywhere flat. So at least that explains that. The sidewalk by the bus stop is actually pretty wide. I don't know how great of a shape it is, but the picture doesn't quite do it justice. It kind of looks like there's things in the way, but the width might be good. I don't know. I don't remember about the quality of the sidewalk itself. But I do also want to encourage somehow squaring off that intersection, or maybe even like a raised crosswalk to kind of slow down the cars, because the cars do whip out pretty fast. They're coming off of McGrath and they did turn down Poplar Street. So it seems like one way to kind of meet that existing non-compliant sidewalk on Poplar Street could be to do some sort of raised square crosswalk, raised corner, or sorry, a raised crosswalk with a squared off corner, and maybe that would help some as well.
I think that's also excellent comments. Anyone else want to add to what Joan said? I have one question. How do you cross the street to go towards like, Target area?
When you're walking, I don't walk that way.
Yeah, well,
I'm trying to remember that area. I think that there's a crosswalk somewhere a couple blocks.
I can speak
from
to
there.
that if you,
Oh, you can.
yeah.
I can look at a map and find it.
Yeah, I can speak to that if that's helpful. So if you go up So to the rest of Somerville, you basically go up to the upper left, past the bus stop, which is probably like 3 or 4 blocks or 3 or 4 sidewalk squares further along. And then there's essentially a crosswalk that isn't in great shape right now. And then that gets you to essentially Somerville Ave, where the target is on Somerville Ave. And so that's where you kind of cross under McGrath and connects to Medford Street. So I know a lot of people cross illegally, a couple, like basically right where you see the sidewalk ending, because that's kind of the fastest way across. And there's currently not great crosswalks at the under McGrath. But that's how people get there.
Where's the lights? Isn't there a light there?
There is a light, yeah. It's like I said, it's past the bus stop, and it's not in this particular picture.
So there's a few down pictures. I think this is page 21.
Yeah, if you go to page 20, you can kind of see the light. And this is the picture that's doesn't quite do great justice in like the width of the sidewalk. So this is where the sidewalk, I think.
Oh, so the lights further that way.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
there's like the bus stop, and you can kind of see the light in the back there.
So there's no crosswalk at the light.
There is a crosswalk, but you kind of, because of all the construction, what they've had to do is you kind of have to cross the underpass multiple times to get across. They're reconstructing that area.
Is that something we can ask them to correct now?
I think they are correcting it. I think it might be some different project. I'm not quite sure exactly what that's for. Maybe it's been like that for a while.
Yeah, Holly, this is Brian. The city is actively in construction there, finishing up the Somerville Avenue construction project, which includes a large culvert underneath the roadway there, as well as a bunch of other utilities. And then that area gets not reconstructed, but returned to the condition that it was prior to our construction.
Okay. I think we need to move on to the other two, although they are smaller. But does anyone have any pros or
So
anything else you want to add?
I guess
so
just
before we move on,
procedurally, what is the, like, are we voting on what's going to go into our memo? Like, how does this work?
we're voting either to support or not support. And if we don't support, explaining why we don't support it. And at present, and that non-support can include recommendations that would allow us to support it. So what I have from the conversation so far is that we do not support it. They have not described or justified the limits of the work and why it ends where it ends. And 2, they have not, thank you, Edward. And they have not, sorry, I lost my train of thought. They haven't justified their extensive work, and we would request that they extend at minimum the upper left corner. We can get a better direction to extend it either to the nearest compliant sidewalk or to the bus stop, whichever is closer.
I agree with that.
Yep.
Anyone
That
disagree?
matches what I was about to say. So
I do have
yes.
one other concern though. McGrath Highway continues on, and it, when it gets into Medford, it gets worse. So even though we're a Somerville commission, we are in entirety saying these are the things we don't like about this state variance, correct?
Yeah, we only have
yeah, I guess that is-
jurisdiction. We only have jurisdiction in Somerville. We can't really comment on, as a commission, we can't, as a Somerville commission, we can't comment on things in other communities.
even if
Yeah,
they
like
connect
is the
to us.
variance being approved all as one, or is it being approved on a city by city basis?
It's a one request, man.
Yeah, I'm sure it's
Ah.
one big variance, but I don't think we can comment on what goes on in other cities.
Yeah, I don't think we can, but I think it should
Okay.
be part of whatever we write, just an acknowledgement that this is only addressing the parts that are relevant to the
Yes.
Somerville intersections, and we are not, we are explicitly not providing comment on the others rather than implicitly supporting them.
Yep.
So shall we vote, all those members that can vote who are not employees and are commissioners?
Yeah, so Holly, I can vote. I just can't be chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Please
that's
say
okay.
again.
No,
Okay, so I will
All
put
those in,
forth,
oh, sorry,
do
do
we
you
need to
have
put forth a motion?
yeah, Leon, you need to, I
Okay,
would,
so I will put forth a motion to, are we deputizing Bonnie to send a memo to this effect?
we
Is
can,
that what we're officially voting on?
we can make
Or-
our motion of what our recommendations is, and at the end, we can make a separate vote on how we want to execute the recommendations.
Okay. Okay.
Just
So
so
I
that we don't
will-
have to do that over and over again.
Okay, so I will make a motion for the commission to express to maybe that we do not support this variance and would support reconsidering it if MassDOT can provide justification for why they are unable to extend the project scope to include the existing non-compliant sidewalk they're tying into, and specifically would like the project scope to be increased at least to include the adjacent bus stop.
Got it.
all those, shall we vote?
Well, I'll second that and then we can vote.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Right.
Anyone abstaining from voting? And the ayes have it, Brian.
Got it. Before we move on to the next one, is Joan still here?
I am, yes.
Were Ed and you representing an organization, or were you as individuals?
We were here representing SAS, but I
Okay.
also use that intersection a lot, so I have a self-interest in that as well.
Perfect, perfect. All right, I will mark that down then. That's fantastic. Thanks, Joan.
Okay, so moving on to the next one. There are three. Should we go to Highland Ave?
Mhm.
414 Highland Avenue.
Should I just jump into comments on this one?
Sure, Leon, but I just wanted to give a little background. I did talk to Bonnie, which I'm sure those things will be shared. I just also want to note Michael is here, and Michael did provide a response from the Boston Center for Independent Living, who also got this request. And so he can verbally, whatever he wants to do, he can verbally, or I can pull up his email.
It was a great
Bonnie,
letter.
yeah. Bonnie also spoke with another tenant who owns a business in the basement at 414 Highland, just to get some clarification on the structure. It's a fairly old building with a lot of steel, which she has learned is a bit of a hindrance to certain things that I think we all wish could be done. So it's up, so I will let you all discuss.
Okay. Has everybody had a chance to read through it and are familiar with the request?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so my reaction to this one is similar to the MassDOT one of they haven't provided sufficient justification for why adding a ramp would be infeasible. They say that they can't do it because of the tenant in the basement, but haven't provided any actual explanation of what about the structure makes that not possible, and haven't provided any like engineering plans or assessments or whatever. I don't know exactly what that would entail, but again, I would support denying it unless those can be provided, because it's entirely possible that the answer is that no, the way the building is built, you can't change that without it completely messing up the space in the basement, but it's also entirely possible that that's not the case and they haven't provided enough information to assess that. So I would not support it without that information and would support reconsidering it if that information is provided.
I have a question. If this is already like this, is it because they want to do renovations? And when you do renovations, you need to
Yeah.
get back
So-
to.
Yeah, so this is what it looks like now. This is what it was before. It was a Italian food shop.
I
or
remember it.
something. Yeah.
Mhm.
And they are requesting this variance, and those are the plans because, oh, I thought there was a picture, an after picture. Perhaps I missed it.
No,
But they-
there is.
There was another one farther down.
Oh, okay, I missed it. Oh, here it is.
Last
Let me
page.
flip it. That way. Almost. There we go. So, Katie, they want to essentially, so on the left, this is what it looks like now. And then essentially they want to take these two doors that exist and make them into windows and then create sort of a double door entrance to the right of the building. Because they're turning it into, I think, an ice cream shop. or
So
something.
is it compliant right now? No.
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 And so they
because
just want to keep it non-compliant.
they want to change the whole front facade to adapt to reventing the interior space to be an ice cream shop, but they have not provided, as everybody has said on this, a
Yeah.
way to make it accessible or compliant. There is a tenant in the basement. The building has a lot of steel, especially in the ceiling and the structure. And I think Bonnie talked to the gentleman who owns the business in the basement. And the steel, I guess, is a problem in terms of trying to reconstruct it to get it where it needs to be.
So this is now going to be one business where currently it's two. That's why
Yes.
there's a door to left and right.
Yes.
Now they're going to make, is the walkway or the entrance wide enough? Is it?
So I think the
Are the
issue that
doors
they were
also the
saying
right
is
way?
that the first floor of the building itself is above the sidewalk, and there's not space on the sidewalk to put a ramp. So to ramp it, you would need to remove material from the building itself, and
They say it's like 5
that may or may
inches.
not be possible, but they haven't provided any justification for why it's not.
Doesn't it say that the height of it? How high it is now?
Yeah, I believe it's 5 inches.
And I don't know if it's a justification, but I do have the latest email from Thomas Peterman, who is the architect who put together these plans. And this was a response to Michael's statement. And if you want, I can read it or pull out what's important if that's helpful.
Michael, you want to summarize it or?
Yeah, let me start because it's pretty lengthy. So,
Oh, no, I was
Um,
sorry, excuse me. I was asking Michael if he wanted to speak.
I haven't seen it. Mr.
Oh,
Peterman,
I apologize, Adrian.
Mr.
and
Peterman did
Michael.
not, what, was that dated today, Adrian?
no, this was actually from the 29th and you were on here.
Oh, okay. I
Um,
thought it went today. So, I'm sorry.
No problem.
You said
Um,
29th, was
Share
it
it on
20
your
the 29th
screen.
of December or 29th of November?
November.
Okay, so I did see that, yes.
Okay. So I guess there was first a discussion, an acknowledgement of Michael's thoughts. And then they discussed a possible accommodation with the accommodation for a temporary or foldable ramp to have, you know, on property if it was ever needed. And so Thomas Peterman goes on to explain the existing multi-tenant building in Davis Square is situated on a front lot line with only a public walkway hard against the facade of the building. The 50-plus-year-old building has a single step up from the public sidewalk to ground level retail spaces in the building. The steel frame building has a basement tenant directly below the ground level with low ceilings, which precludes installing a ramp or lift within the footprint of the building because of the cost of modifying the steel concrete structure would be excessive and unreasonable and would result in taking a tenant space not part of the applicant's space. We would hope that the technical challenges of such an idea would be evident to the board, which is why we have not invested a lot of effort in demonstrating this difficulty in addressing this condition within the building footprint. We have in every other respect made considerable efforts to make the tenant space fully accessible per 521 CMR as evidenced by the plan submitted. We know that it is not an uncommon condition in dense urban environments and look to the board for consideration of this application. We will accept a temporary foldable ramp that will project into the public way when needed to eliminate the barrier at the entrance as a condition for your approval of the application for a waiver. Because of the relatively small height of the single step, we believe this is a reasonable solution.
How does the tenant get in? Separate door?
The basement tenant?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
5 inches of head space. I just feel like there's not a lot of creativity or other attempts made. And I think you brought it up, Michael. I don't think that's an ADA compliant bathroom.
I didn't bring up the bathroom issue, but I did talk about, first of all, Michael Mewey, Access Analyst for the Boston Center for Independent Living. Thanks for opportunity to talk this evening. To answer the question that was posed a minute ago, the Martial Arts Studio, which is located in the basement, they have their own entrance. If you were standing in front of the door, way off to the left, at the left-hand edge of the building, there's a stairway down into the Martial Arts Studio. So with regard to it's true, there is a 5-inch step to get into the building, and the petitioner, in this case, the ice cream shop, or the architect for the ice cream shop, has argued that it would be technically infeasible to do this work, to basically cut into that corner of the steel and to create a ramp. I would point out that it's a little inconsistent because they are removing the existing 2 entrances into the old Italian food shop, and essentially creating this brand new entrance way off to the right of where the existing 2 entrances are. So there's going to be a lot of cutting and constructing and who knows what as part of that construction. I think the important thing here is that the access board asked the petitioner to provide an engineering study of what it would take engineering wise to create a ramped entrance at that new location where the petitioner's proposing to put in a new entrance. So that's going to be the key thing at the hearing. This is actually a variance hearing before the board at 1 o'clock on Monday, and I would encourage as many of you to attend that as possible, particularly if this committee, if this commission votes tonight to oppose the variance, which I would strongly recommend that you do so. I really find this at the verge of laughability in terms of what they're saying, that they can't create a new, they can create a new entrance, but they can't ramp it. They can eliminate these existing two entrances, but that those considerable acts of construction are somehow magically not going to disrupt the business underneath the martial arts studio, whereas putting the ramp will somehow cause some major disruption to the tenant underneath. Furthermore, I would just make the point that under the ADA, both landlord and tenant are jointly responsible for bear removal. So they, ADA arguments generally don't apply to the access board because they're only tasked with enforcing state code, which is 521 CMR. But I think it bears repeating, or it bears making the point that, you know, the ADA does require some cooperation between the landlord and the tenant in terms of achieving compliance. So that's really kind of a red herring for them to say that.
Yeah, this is Leon. I was just opening up Street View to get a better image of the facade than is in the document. And one thing I'm noticing is that the material of the step at the entrance is different than the material of the wall down to the sidewalk level next to it. Like the bricks at the sidewalk level appear to go, or at not the entrance, appear to go all the way to the sidewalk level. And there's a sort of separate, it looks like stone of some sort at the step. So I think that it is, I don't think they can argue that it is obvious that it is not possible without an engineering study. So I think that if they want to get a variance based on it being technologically infeasible to add a ramp, then they need to actually do the study that says that, rather than saying that it should be obvious.
And you said you're looking at like currently what it looks like. What are the other buildings that are at that same street point? How do other people have access? I mean, there's
I think
to
the
the left,
entire
there's-
building, I think the entire building is currently non-compliant, and it's just, this is the only one that is currently, like the only space within that building that is currently being substantially renovated. And so it's the only one that is triggering that need to come into compliance. But the entire building is non-compliant in that same way.
Michael, did you bring in your letter that they were spending more than 275,000? Or am I confusing?
Let me see if I can pull up my letter here. What I said was, yeah, they're spending 275,000 in renovation work, which does trigger the requirement for an accessible public entrance in an accessible public toilet.
Yep.
I don't recall noticing any problem with the toilet room that they're proposing. And I'd have to go back to.
It's not very
double-
well drawn. I think one thing I'd like to see in our remarks is the dimensions and design of that public toilet, as it does have to be ADA compliant.
I'm not super familiar with the process. If they are not requesting a variance for the bathroom, does that mean that it has been approved under general code as being compliant?
It doesn't
Or
mean it's
is
been
that
approved.
something
What
that
it
we would
means
want
is
to
if
check
they're not asking for a variance, then it has to be compliant. Or they would have to go back to the board at a later date and seek another variance. So the fact that they're not asking for a variance on the restroom means that they're essentially certifying that it's compliant. Right.
Okay. Yeah, so if that's the case, then I don't think we need to bring that up in whatever we write.
So would the city inspectional services, Brian, verify that it was in a plan before they started working?
At building permit review, they would do that.
And they're not at that point yet.
I don't know offhand, but I will look for you right now while we're discussing.
Anyone else have any comments or feedback they'd like to share?
This is Michael. I had one more quick thing to point out, which is that there's been a lot of discussion in the correspondence with the access board about having a temporary ramp on this, in that which would require deployment onto the city sidewalk when a customer with a disability wanted to enter this facility. And I think in its initial review of this case back in November, I think it was, the board kind of quickly jumped from a permanent accessible ramp, which would be required in 521 CMR, and they jumped into a discussion about whether a temporary ramp could even be deployed there. The sidewalk is only 8 feet wide there, and with a 5 foot, with a 5-inch rise that would require ramp length of 5 feet, which would only leave 3 feet to turn for a wheelchair user, for example, to turn to get on or off the ramp at the base of the ramp, which is a little dicey. The board could approve a ramp somewhat. If it came down to this, I think that the threshold issue here is, should they be required to provide a permanent ramp into the facility as part of the creation of this new accessible entrance? To some extent, the whole discussion around a temporary ramp is again kind of a red herring, because the petitioner has not proven that it's technologically infeasible to build a permanent ramp. So we shouldn't really even be talking about temporary ramps until that issue has been resolved to the satisfaction of the board. So,
Michael, because you seem to know more about this process than I do, once they have determined that it's either technologically infeasible or at an excessive cost, does that immediately go into an approval of the variance, or does that go into a mitigation phase of what they do to mitigate for the lack of compliance?
well, the board has a lot of leeway here. So,
Okay.
but because this is a hearing, this is essentially, for all intents and purposes, this is probably the last time the board is going to be looking at it in any kind of depth. Unless, for example, let's say on Monday, the petitioner shows up and they bring in this really kind of crappy, pardon my French, engineering report. The board could decide to continue the case, to continue the hearing, or continue the consideration pending a better engineering report. So that's always possible. But usually in these cases, once the hearing is over, the board makes their decision whether or not to grant the variance, and that's it. Anyone who's aggrieved by that would have to go to Superior Court to file a motion in Superior Court to overturn the board's decision, which is very, very rare. So
Yeah.
that's why the hearing on Monday is so important, because
Okay.
this
Yeah,
is
and-
probably going to be the last bite at the apple.
Yeah. So, and I asked that question because a relatively similar case came up about a year and a half ago, maybe, on Summer Street, and the board requested that the applicant engage the city on potentially reconstructing the sidewalk to make their entrance compliant. And now speaking on behalf of the city, as the city engineer, I don't know if I might be in favor of that.
Would be?
I might be, yes, we might be in favor of that. the downside, Holly, and I think this is important for you to understand, is that to do that, you would end up with basically a double curb. So you would get out of your car, and not only would you step up one curb, but you'd step up a second curb to get to the sidewalk level. Basically, you're moving that step from the building face out to just behind the existing curb face, which is what we had done on Broadway when a building there had similar challenges, and they did that for their whole building. It's not ideal, but it does solve the accessibility issue.
I do like the
Honestly,
idea
I
of
kind of like
working with them.
that because that could solve it for the entire building and not just the one that is being renovated. But I don't know what the process would be for that, and if that's something that we can put in this.
I think if we're going to not accept the variance or recommend against the variance, I think that's certainly something that we could suggest as a way to solve the problem. That's not saying that we would agree to doing it. That I'm saying that they would have to engage the city to come up with a plan that would be agreeable to the city and to the board and to the commission.
Yeah, I guess that's to support this variance, I would want both documentation that they have done the technical studies to show that it is infeasible to add it within the building, and also that they have engaged the city and determined whether or not it is possible to modify the city sidewalk for the building. And without both of those things coming back as not possible, I would not support the variance.
I think we should move to vote. So we have 10 minutes remaining. Unless anyone has anything else they'd like to add. On 414 Highland Avenue.
So
I think that's all. Go ahead.
So I will make a motion based on the collection of thoughts that I've jotted down here. And we can amend that motion once made, if I don't have it correctly. So I move to deny the variance due to a lack of engineering documents or explanation describing it as being infeasible to adjust the structure of the building to provide a compliant and accessible ramp inside the structure. And B, they have not provided any costs of what it would cost to accomplish that goal. And C, they have not proposed any mitigation of this by way of a temporary ramp showing that it could be deployed in a compliant manner. And D, if it is determined that none of those three previous things are justifiably possible, then they should engage with the city to reconstruct the sidewalk along the entire frontage of the building to provide compliant entrances.
I think that's great.
Second that.
I could, Michael Mew again, just interject in terms of, there's a little bit of verbiage, but rather than the motion say that we move to deny, rather than should be, we move to recommend that the board deny, because the Somerville Commission can't deny the variance, but
that's
the board, so. Right.
No, Michael, that's a really good point. I will incorporate that onto this and the previous one.
Okay. And I would just say both this topic and the previous one, they're obviously both on the agenda for Monday, although the MassDOT is not a hearing, it's an incoming case, so it's not as crucial. But to the extent that this commission can submit a letter to the board on these topics before Monday, that would be highly preferable.
Yeah, that will be, I believe that can be our goal.
Yeah, I believe that's why we scheduled the meeting before our regular meeting, so.
Okay.
yeah,
And
it is-
Michael,
I didn't
you
realize
said,
this is a special meeting. Thanks.
you said that 7 Linden is also on for Monday, or the
7
2
Linden, 1 second. Don't see. 7 Linden, I don't see 7 Linden at all. So
okay. Let's
that's not on the agenda for Monday.
let's still call a vote. Did we get a first and a second?
I believe
I need a
seconded.
second to the motion.
Okay, if I didn't already, I second it.
Okay, then. All those in favor of not accepting as proposed, please say aye. Am I saying it wrong, Brian?
Yeah, you're actually supposed to say all those in favor of the motion.
All those
As-
in favor
as
of the
stated.
motion as
Yeah.
stated, please say aye, raise your hand.
Right?
All, any opposed? Anyone abstaining from voting? The ayes have it. Need a hammer sound. Katie, you have like a
Thank you.
Thank
a
you, Michael.
mallet. Very nice to
Well-
meet you, Michael.
At my
Thank
old
you.
job, I
Thank you.
used to. It
Hope
got
to see
left
you all
there
again
though.
soon.
Linden Street.
Yeah.
And you're welcome to give feedback on this one too, Michael.
Unfortunately,
Oh,
I'm going to have to leave the meeting.
thank
So
you.
I haven't seen this one, so I'm gonna skip it. Thanks anyway.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
And this is a plumber,
yeah.
a plumbing.
Yeah, so the background to this is just a private resident of Somerville, a man who recently is having some physical disability because of some back issues and is requesting a variance to the Massachusetts Plumbing Code 248 CMR 10.10 7C4 to continue to use the existing 1.5 drain because he needs to install a walk-in shower in order to be able to shower and have accessibility to that. I did previously talk to Bonnie about this one. And there's no hesitation there. The only thing she would recommend is where this is located is prone. So the problem with walk-in showers is they can sometimes create flooding depending on how the plumbing is put in. And so her recommendation was, I think, a low, I'm trying to find the right language, something with the shower head so the water could be controlled a bit more.
Isn't it typically like a 3-inch
so-
requirement? I know it's not, 1.5 is very small.
Yes.
And why can't they make it wider for this gentleman so he can still have his walk-in shower?
I assume it's that it would be a lot more work to replace the entire
Yeah, I
piping
think,
system than just the like above ground,
yes.
take out the tub and tile the
Right.
floor.
Yeah.
My question on this is what sort of building it's in? Like, is this a single family home that he owns? Is this a rental? Is this a condo? Like, are there other people in the building that would be affected if the shower were to overflow?
That I don't know. I am trying to pull up Google Map. So what I've just pulled up, it looks like it is a single family home.
Yeah, so
Okay,
he's
yeah, because if it is,
for himself.
oh,
Yeah, he's by himself.
There's no tenant. He's a homeowner.
If it's an owned single family house, I would be in favor of approving it, no restrictions. Because if the only risk is that it might overflow, he can understand that and make his own decisions. If there are other people in the building, or if it's a rental, if there's potential for other people to be affected if it were to overflow, then I would support a contingency for a low flow shower head.
Yeah, and that was,
if it's
yeah,
just his building, then I don't even need that.
right. So if he's the owner, which we've established, if there's flooding, if it happens, then, you know, that's his responsibility because he is the owner of this property. So, but I think there would be a way, and Brian can maybe offer insight if you all did say this is fine, just to make a recommendation or suggestion that he use a low flow shower head.
Why don't we see that application?
What application?
So he's applying for a variance to the Mass Plumbing Code.
Right.
So that's not through Somerville, that's a separate application, correct?
So this is a variance to the Mass Plumbing Code. It probably, and I'm not sure, I did shoot this over to Nick Antenovica, our ISD director. And I hadn't heard back from him yet, but it may be that this variance is approved by our own building department, ISD, and doesn't go to the state.
Okay.
Because they're requesting a variance from the plumbing code. They're not requesting a variance from the state plumbing association, or plumbing board, which is a little bit different. So this may be something that is going to be passed off to ISD to say, hey, this is real. I think what we're doing here is agreeing that his condition is valid. I don't think we're saying that this is safe or acceptable from a public safety standpoint.
Don't we have local funds to help pay for the cost of things like this? For making homes accessible? I know that's an aside thing and we're right at an hour and a half, but I'm just wondering.
I'm not aware of a grant that you can apply to. I know that we can give the city can relax rules, especially zoning rules for to accommodate people with disabilities.
There definitely are. I don't recall off the top of my head, like if they're city level or state level or county level or whatever, but there definitely are grants you can get, or I get like loans that you don't ever have to repay unless you sell the house, for making modifications for accessibility. But I think that my opinion is that he should be allowed to decide that the way he wants to do it is to keep the existing drain pipe. And if that's not going to affect anyone else. And I don't think we have to decide whether that is the best choice for him to make. I think that we can decide that he is allowed to assess his own risk and decide what makes most sense for him. And if it's not going to affect anyone else, if he makes a decision that ends up having consequences, then I don't think we have to prevent him from making that decision.
I'm not at all implying that I don't agree with you. I'm just wondering if we were aware of a program we could also refer him to, because if we were able to help him pay for the costs of turning that drain from 1.5 inches to 3, so it truly is safe and it doesn't flood, he isn't in that risk. It was sort of, as the commission, we understand there is this piece that may be helpful for you, or I agree, he should have his drain, but I would prefer that his drain, that he had the ability to put it in first time at 3 inches, or whatever that should be, without making him wait longer to be able to shower without pain. So, and if this is simply us saying, yes, you have our permission, or we support your request, then we can vote. If it sounds that's why, like where we're landing.
Right.
But I
And I
just think as a commission, if we're going to support people who need accessibility in their own homes, if we knew of a way to do that, that we could add that as well. It doesn't have to be the same letter. We could simply follow up, or I don't know, Adrian, do you maybe you're aware of a program?
I'm not at this point, and that's something I'm exploring with Denise. There are several grants out there that are available to commissions, such as yourselves. This commission has applied for a grant, I think for 2 years in a row, and not gotten it because there was already a working commission and transition plan in place. And the grant was more so for municipalities in Massachusetts that aren't as established as Somerville. But there is a chance that we could apply for it again next year. I just don't know what the stipulations with those funds are. The other thing coming down the pipeline for this commission is that I will have to create an MOU or a procedure that you all will have to sign off on for the accessible parking funds, which can be used by this commission. But there is going to be a procedure attached to that. You will have, the commission, if they want to use those funds, will have to write a memo in line with the commission about what you want to use those funds for before the city will disperse them. So that is a separate process. And I don't think, off the top of my head, something like that could be used to help
Yeah.
a homeowner. It would have to be a very specific grant for, let's say, improving private accessibility for residents who, for whatever reason, get rendered physically or intellectually disabled. But
There
that's,
are
Yeah,
there are
so
resources for renters, but
yes.
I am blanking on the name of the program right now, so I'm having a hard time immediately finding a link to it. But I know that there is a program for getting, I think it's like up to $50,000 or $100,000 in, I forget the technical term, like refundable loan or whatever, like
you pay
loan,
it
but you
back
don't
when you
actually
sell
have
your
to.
house. It's
Yeah, you don't actually have to
interest-free,
pay it
things
back
like
unless you
that.
sell it.
And I'm going to
That
interrupt you.
Yeah, I forget where that's through though, but it does
I
exist.
apologize. I'm just going to interrupt you for one moment. Would it be okay if we had a motion to decide how we're going to respond to this, just so that we can end closer to time? I'm happy to stay longer, and I would like to continue the conversation. I just want us to be able to have that on the record if we're in a place where we have made a decision.
Yeah, I think so. One thing I will mention on the variance request itself is I did just look up the property in the assessors database, and the name of the owner that's listed there is not the same as the name on the request. So it's a single family, but I don't know for sure if it's owned or rented. So I would put in the response that we support the variance, and if it is not a
single family home owned by the requester, that there be a stipulation of a low flow shower head. Just because I can't confirm whether it is or is not.
Leanne, I think that's a wise idea. In fact, probably worth saying, even if it was owner occupied, because we would only be doing it as a recommendation, not as a requirement.
Right.
But if it is a rental unit or a rental home, they'll have to get a plumbing permit to do the work, which requires sign off from the property owner. So they won't be able to do it without the property owner knowing, is what I'm getting at.
Right. And Brian, you did say that there is a chance that Nick and inspections would have to maybe get involved in this one.
They'll have to get involved, yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. In one way or another, either by permitting it or by accepting the variance request. What I'm worried is that they don't know that they have to. Okay, actually, Katie, before you go, can we vote on this?
Yeah, that's why I was letting you know. Sorry,
Okay.
I have a crying child.
No, I understand. I will move to, I don't know if we're approving, but I approve that we recommend the variance request for 7 Linden. Understanding that the house is a single family house, that the risk of a undersized drain is potential bathroom flooding. And to help mitigate that risk, we recommend that a low flow or controllable flow shower head be used.
I will second that motion.
We vote all those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? No
I see 4
abstain.
ayes.
It's all the ayes. Passed, yes, we grant you our favorable permission. We wish you happy showering. Make sure there's a seat in that shower so you don't fall for
Yeah.
safety.
Right.
And
Okay, I'm
rail.
gonna jump off. Bye, guys.
Okay,
Bye,
Katie,
Katie.
thank you.
Okay.
Okay, since we are no longer at quorum, the meeting is now over at 8:08.
Yes.
Don't I get to say that?
You do, but I'm pointing out a statement of
Officially,
fact.
we are adjourned at 8:08.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure that